Hi, we're back and we're ready to start working on block E, which is our pillow, or you can make this into an amazing table topper. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Here's the finished project so you can see how that all works together and what we're going to be working on the steps. So let's get started. All right, so I've got my board laid out into the steps that we're going to be working on. I've drawn my lines as per the pattern. So with our flip and stitch method, we're just ready to sew. We're going to start off with our center of our block, and we're going to sew doing a square and a square method basically, where we're taking our pieces and we're going to place them on opposite corners, and we're going to stitch to the outside of that line. So just ride the line right next to it, but we're going to be just to the outside of that block in the orientation of that. So go ahead and stitch here and stitch here, and then we're going to do the flip and stitch method with the iron, just flipping that up. So taking this over to the iron, or to the machine, we're going to select our center stitch, and away we go. Gonna trim that. We're going to flip that around. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. All right. Now we're going to take this to the iron and we're going to press these out. So what I like to do is, if I'm working with two pieces at a time like this, I'm going to give the top a quick set, and we're going to take that first piece and use the iron to press that out. Okay? We're going to flip that around, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So we've done our flip and stitch at this point. I'm going to move my board off to the side so I have those oriented there. Come back in here, and we're going to do that trim option. So here we're going to place that right up to the seam, and we're going to trim 1/4 of an inch from there. All right, put that in our little trash pile, flip this up, and we're going to do the same thing. Line that up to the seam and trim. All right, so once we've got it to this point, we're going to grab those next two pieces and we're going to place them on the other side. Okay, so we're going to place them on the opposite corners. Then we're going to stitch here to here again. So if you feel like you need to pin these on, go right ahead, but they should stay pretty much in place. Let's come on over here. Okay, we're ready to press those out again, just like we did on the previous step. So we're going to come over to the iron. We're going to give it a quick set to set those seams, to get them to relax. Use the iron to press that up. Flip that over, and we're going to press the other side. So at this point, we have a square and a square. Isn't that fun? It's a great block to do with a layer cake or anything like that that you have in your stash, that you can crank out something fun and different with just a simple little flip and stitch. That's what we're going for. All right, so there's our block. We're going to make sure that this is measuring the size that we need to, and you'll refer to the pattern in that aspects of it. Just a quick look again, I'm where I need to be. So next what we're going to do is take this piece and we're going to sew our squares around it. So we're going to take these pieces here and we're going to orientate them like this. Okay, so sewing one to one side, one to the other side. Grab this guy, I'm going to do a little flip here, come on over to the machine, and we're going to stitch. Now don't forget to change your stitch to a 1/4 inch stitch at this point, rather than having a down the center with our flip and stitch. We get in that mode, so make sure you're remembering to flip that over. So I'm going to take that next piece. Before I even go to the iron, I'm just going to come from here. Now one tip that I personally love to do when I'm sewing is I actually sew from this side instead of keeping this on the bottom, so that when I stitch I can actually see where my needle needs to land. So if I need to maneuver that a little bit, I can, but you should be able to go right across there and make sure that that's an accurate 1/4 inch seam. so we don't cut off any points is what the end goal is there. So here we go, ready to go. Okay. What you'll be able to see when we come to the iron, I'm going to give it a quick set here, and you're going to lift that up and press. Okay, rotate that, lift that up and press. And what you'll notice is that we have no cutoff points. That's what our goal is with that project, of making sure that those points are right where we want them. Now we're going to take the next set, which we're going to take our D blocks. I'm going to place those on either side. Are you catching an idea of how this goes together? It goes together pretty quick, right? So here, we're going to sew from here to here. We're going to stitch that all the way down. And again, if you want to make sure that orientation is there, you could sew from the other side. Or if you feel pretty confident that you can see that from this side, go right ahead. Okay, we're going to cut our thread, lift that up, grab our next piece, and put that on the other side. So now we're going to stitch all the way across. All right, here we go. Okay, now we're going to go back to the iron, and we're going to go ahead and press those seams open, or up, not open, we're just pressing them up. So give a good set across the whole length, and then use the iron to press that seam open. I love to use just the body of the iron to get that seam to go where I need it to go without forcing it with the tip. Okay, so here we are. We're going to make sure that our block measures the size that we need to at this point before we continue on. And I can do a quick glance there, and I know where we need to be. You could use a ruler, your square up rulers, to make sure those are orientated as per what the pattern states. Okay, now we're on to the next step. Here we've got our square and a square with our border around it, and now we're going to take our next set of blocks and we're going to sew them just like we did this center section. We're going to do that on the outside of this section. So we're going from corner to corner here. This one, they're a little longer, so we're going to control this just a little bit. I'm going to put a pin on that side. I'm going to flip this around, and we're going to do the same thing on this corner. Okay, orientating it that way, taking your pin, pinning it to the side. And again, we're stitching to the outside of this line, not directly on the line. Give yourself a little bit of clearance for pressing and whatnot, and your thread types. So again, we're going to just stitch, changing it over to your center section. Get that right back where we need to be. All right, here we go. Okay. Now what we're going to do is remove those pins, and we're going to take it to the iron. We're going to stitch, or we're going to press those out, just like we've done on those flip and stitch methods through our quilt blocks, and as well as our just a whole pattern that we've been working with. It's the same method over and over again, right? So again, our points, look how beautiful those are. They're turning out fantastic. That's what we want to watch for. We don't want any cut off tips as we look at our pattern. Okay, so I'm going to tip that up. I'm going to line that up with my seam, and I'm going to trim that. It's going to go on my stash pile there. Flip this other guy up, and we're going to trim this one. Okay, now for the next side. Okay, can you see where we're going? We've got one more side to do. We're going to take him, put those on this corner. Put them on this one, and I'm going to again put the pin in there just so we don't have as much movement. If you feel like you need to pin both sides, go right ahead. Okay. Take out those pins, and I'm going to take it to the iron one more time. We're going to press those seams open. Okay, just like that. We have the center of our block ready to go. We're going to go ahead and flip those two edges up and trim back those seams so we have a nice square. That's our goal. is to start off with the square piece. All right, so there's our center, making sure we are measuring the size that we need to be, which I feel pretty confident that we're right about there for you. So if you feel like you need to, you can take your square up ruler and put that on there, or give it a haircut here and there, but we want to make sure that we don't trim off more than our 1/4 inch at our points, because we need to make sure that when we sew that together, those look nice and crisp. So there's our center. We're going to come back to working with him in just a moment, but we're going to move on to the next section, which is our almost like it's a flying geese section. So if you've done any kind of flying geese units, that's exactly what we're going to be working with. So moving on to our next section, we have our 3 different cuts that are used in this particular lineup. We're going to take our F block, and we're going to take our 2 of our contrast prints, and we're going to sew them. We're going to put them square to the fabric here, and we're going to stitch. Now, if you remember, we never want to start stitching at a point. We always want to start stitching at the meat and work our way out. So as we sew this, we're going to start sewing here and working our way out at that point. If you feel like you need to pin, you can do that. I just usually give it a quick glance on the back and make sure that I'm not overhanging one way or the other too much. So again, here to here is where we're sewing. Come to the machine. We're going to stitch. Okay. Cutter. Going to open that up. And what we're going to do now is take it to the iron, and we're going to press this up, and we're going to trim that back, just like we've been doing on all of our other flip and stitch methods. So here we go. Keeping that nice and square without distorting it. We're going to tip this back, and we're going to trim. All right, so there's one section. Now we're going to take this other section, and we're going to go the opposite corner. So just like you're making a standard flying geese with the flip and the stitch method. So again, we don't want to start at the corner. We're going to start in the meat of the block and start stitching from here. All right. Here we go. Okay, once you've gotten to this point, we're going to go to the iron once more, and we're going to press that up. Okay, so here we have just a standard flying geese. As you look at that, we're going to tip this back, and we're going to trim. So we could stop here, but we're going to continue on because we're going to add just one more element to this block. What we're going to do is take our next cut, and this one, we don't want to run the same direction. We don't want to make sure it's parallel. We want to contrast that angle. So kind of like a 1/4 square triangle, but we're going to be going from here to here. So again, the tip is on our red end, and our meat is at the gold end down here. So again, we're going to sew from here to here. All right. Okay, cut those threads, go to the iron one more time, and we're going to flip that up from here. So I love this method because it creates a whole nother element to the block of adding a contrast, right? So here we're going to take and place from here, and just like that we have our other angle. Now we're going to add that last one on, going the opposite direction again from this angle, and we're going to place it in the corner. So again, we're going to start in the meat, work our way to the point of the block. All right, we're going to press that one more time. Okay, now what we're going to do is take and flip that back that last time. We're going to put our excess there, and we're going to make sure that this block measures the size that we need to, because we want to keep everything as square as possible. And I can tell you right now, we're right where we need to be. So there is our flying geese with the spin of a half quarter square triangle on there. Just has some fun variations. So that's one block that we're putting together. Now let's work on the next one. You just did this one, so this one should be no problem at all, because we're just going to make a flying geese. It's pretty standard. We're going to take our background fabric, we're going to take our two contrasts that have our line drawn on it, and we're going to come from the meat to the point one more time, okay? So come in here, and we're going to stitch. Okay. I don't know about you, but I could make flying geese in half square triangles all day long. I love a quilt that has those in them. So any way you can have a fun spin on it, it's always a good idea. And I love the spin that I found on these blocks. So again, we're going to take our ruler, tip this back, and give it a good trim. Okay, and then we're going to add this section right here. So put the other one on the opposite corner, making sure we're sewing to the same point. And again, starting in the meat, sewing to the tip. Come to your iron, and we've got that last flip and stitch method that we're doing here. So again, we're making these flying geese units, so we're ready to put them together. All right, so we're ironing it, and we're going to be putting our pillow together. So here we go. We've got our flying geese to put with our pillow. All right, so here we have our standard flying geese. We have our flying geese that we made from our previous block, right? And this is the orientation that we're looking at. We want the reds to match across the block, and our whites are on opposite ends, okay? So what we're going to do is take this, and we're going to flip it over to the top. You could just start sewing here, but I'm going to share a tip on how to match up to make sure we don't cut off any points on these flying geese, okay? So what you're going to do from the back side, putting them right sides together, we're going to find where the seam intersects, okay? Well, I find that on the back side, and once I find it, I'm going to put a pin in it so I can see it from the front side. I can see that I'm a little bit to my left, probably your right. So once I find that, I'm going to sneak that into the next one on the bottom, okay? So we're just aligning those. I'm going to pull that pin all the way through just so I can align these edges, get them where I want. Once I know that that's where I need it to be, we're going to come from here, and we're going to pin. I pin this one straight on rather than at the angle like I normally do. So we're pinning that directly down the center. Now we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch stitch across those blocks there. Okay, going to the machine, make sure we select our 1/4 inch, get that aligned nice and straight, and we're going to stitch. Now when you come to the pin, just going to move really slow so we can get as close as we can, and then we're going to take that out. Line up the other sides, and we're going to stitch all the way through. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this to the iron, and we're going to press the seam open, okay? The reason on this one we want to press it open is because there's a lot of bulk going right to that center mark for us. So give us a finger press all the way through, and we're just going to give it a quick set. I'll even throw my clapper on there for a second just to give it some extra heat and extra help. Then I'll flip it over, and look how beautiful that point lines right up. I don't have any issues at all with that. So we've got that matched up right where we want it to be, and that is our little side sections of our pillow. So we're done with that one. We're going to set him aside and work on 4 patch is what we're going to work on next. So here we've got our blocks labeled exactly the way we need them, laid out how we want. I'm going to pull my little stickers off because we don't want to get confused on anything. So from here to here, I'm going to stitch, and I'm going to just chain piece these. So from here to here, we're going to stitch both of them together. Okay, so taking them to the machine. So I've got one sewn together. Grab the next section, and we're going to sew that together. And then we're going to take these to the iron, and we are going to press the seam open on these. So just clip those apart, come to the iron, and we're going to press these seams open. If you would like to, you could just press them to the dark side. If you feel like that's something that would work for you a little bit better, that's just fine. Do the method that you like to do with your quilting. Because a lot of times, there's not one way to do everything. There's lots of ways to do something. Okay, so now we have our block. We're going to rotate those to where those two are going to go together. And again, our pinning technique of just tipping that back, make sure that that lines up. And then we're going to pin that at an angle on the right of the seam, crisscross over to the other side of the seam, and we're going to stitch just past the seam, and then we're going to pull that pin out. Okay, so let's go to the iron or the machine and stitch that together. Okay. All right, so I'm just looking at the base here. Pretty confident that's not going to go anywhere, so pull that out. Okay, we're going to clip our thread. Going to go to the iron again. We're going to press that seam open. So give it a good finger press just to get it going, and then we're going to take that iron and make sure that we are getting that nice and flat. Put our clapper on there for a second just to kind of keep those heat where we need it. And here we have our 4-patch. Okay, so we've made our 4 quadrants. Now we're going to be able to put this together. Okay, so we are laying this out into our sections. Make sure we got this. I'm going to get this out of the way. So what we're going to be working on is we're going to be sewing sections like this together. So we have one row already put together. Then we've got our center section we're going to look at here. And if you can see, that creates that star in the center. Here's that block we just made. And the orientation of these 4 patches, the orange goes to the center. Just remember that. The brown's on the outside. And there's that unit that we made there. So this is how we're going to put this together. I'm going to continue to sew these sections together, pressing my seams open on the rows, and then we'll sew the whole thing together, and you've got your pillow ready to go. All right, here we go. We're going to sew these guys together. I'm going to do that pin trick that I told you about, right, where we're matching up that point, looking at it from the back side, match up that point, kind of pull that through, just to make sure he doesn't shift on us at the top of that seam. Okay, so pull that back out. Once we're ready and happy with where we're at, we're going to sew. Okay, coming upon that pin, I'm going to pull that pin out. Okay, and gonna line that up. Okay, there's our first section. Then I'm going to move to the next one. So I'm going to lay this here. We're going to sew this to this. And sew from here. Take that pin out, and away we go. All right, now we're going to take this to the iron, and we're going to press these seams open. So just give it a quick little set from here. Just kind of give it a finger press just to get them started. At that point, we're going to take from here. All right, do the same thing on this one. I love it how the board and the heat that's in the board will actually help kind of finger press that down. Just use the heat that's resonating there to help you get that started at that point. Okay, here we go. And if you feel like you need to use the clapper to get that extra little pressing, never hurts to use your clapper. Okay, here we go. There's our middle section, and we're going to continue on sewing these 4 patches together. All right, so now we're ready to sew these sections together. So we're going to take this middle section, we're going to flip it over and sew it to the bottom section. I am going to watch for that point with our flying geese again. So I'm going to go in with the pin, make sure I found the center, find the center of that one, pull it all the way through. Once we're happy with that, then you can position the pin straight on. Then I'm going to look at my seam here, matching the 2 blocks together. Come in here, and we're going to pin at an angle on this one versus the straight on. And this is where you really get a lot of control using a shorter length pin when you're pinning like this, because the longer pin, there's more movement that can happen. So let's control that as much as you possibly can when you put this together. Tip that back. Again, I'm going to go to the next one. Let's see here. Here we go. And we're ready to sew. So again, I'm going to sew all the way through here, and then we're going to press that seam open again. Okay, here we go. It's a little longer on this one. Okay, now we're going to press that seam open on that length from there. So I'm going to move that up just a little bit. Give myself some room to work. Now, if you feel like you would like to just press this to one side, at this point you can do that. Don't feel like you have to press them open again, because we're at the final assembly on this portion, and it's not going to make a difference on matching seams or anything like that. So if you feel like you want to press it to one side, go right ahead. All right, I'm going to grab that, go all the way through. Gonna work that seam. Okay, we're ready to go. Now we're into our last row. So we're doing the exact same thing we did, but we're doing it with the next section. So go ahead and grab those, and we're gonna start lining things up again. So here, we're gonna find that center point. Okay, so then you're going to the iron, and we're gonna press that seam open at that point. So coming to your iron, we'll open that seam up, just work our way along. And again, if you would like to press that to one side, go right ahead. So we're da-da-da. Sometimes easier than others working off the seam when you want to press him open. And just like that, we have our finished pillow block. Isn't that great? We're so excited to have you join us on this. If you're making the table runner, you'll end up making this in a smaller size. So play around with your block assortments. Try different projects, not just a pillow. Like I said, it could be a table topper, it could be a variety of different projects. But we're so glad you joined us for this. We're going to be moving on to the table runner next.